Are the wealthy responsible for the poverty of other people? It depends on who you ask. If you ask the wealthy, the answer will be a straight no. If you ask the poor, the answer will probably be yes. People get sensitive about this because it feels like you're attacking a person's personality, saying that they're greedy because they won't give more of their money to those in need. But what's the truth? The truth lies behind the question, to what extent are rich nations responsible for other nations' poverty? That gives a bigger picture and it causes less sensitivity, but it also leaves room for the use of statistics and real data, not just personal opinions. Let's think back to a few times certain rich countries decided to help certain poor countries by, well, bombing civilians. Let's think about that for a little bit. These civilians just lost their entire lives if they didn't already lose their soul at the hands of a wealthy nation trying to get wealthier. Let's talk about oil for a bit. No, not that oil, this oil. This troublemaker. You do not want this in your backyard. Why, you ask me? 'Cause your neighbors will be very jealous. Your rich neighbor, or not neighbor, who already has all the olive oil and other oil they could possibly need, will now likely take over your backyard. That's if your landlord hasn't already taken it all, and some people may or may not bomb your backyard and entire house just in case, to protect you from your landlord who might take your belongings. That was a big metaphor for real-life events between different nations. I'll ask you a question. Why are the countries with the most oil and other commodities that can be bought and sold in the global market, like coffee, gold, and copper, the ones that are always at war with, well, I'm not going to mention any names? And why does some other country always want to go over there to help fix their democracy? But yeah, anyways, to make the metaphor more clear here, landlord refers to the government of the country that's rich in commodities. The government might rely on these commodities as their main source of money. But the problem with that is their prices rise and fall quickly and dramatically. That means if they're relying on gold, for example, and that's taken away from them, they have absolutely nothing left to sell, which means they have no money left to buy. That means the country can say goodbye to education, healthcare, and even basic necessities like clean water. Another case is when the government of the country takes all these valuable resources for themselves and makes the wealthy wealthier, which then leaves the poor to make up the majority of the country. And the other nations that have a strong global voice might not speak up about this because it benefits their bank accounts, and if someone does speak up, this is everyone's reaction. There is always a playground bully that simply refuses to accept that other kids could have nice shoes or, well, oil. That's why every time a kid shows up with new shoes, this bully throws dirt at them or takes them off and steals them or, bombs them to protect the kid from how they deal with their shoes, because the kid and their parents may not know how to deal with the shoes and the bully knows what's better. That's a commodity curse in a nutshell. Wealthy nations decide that other nations that have lots of not olive oil won't know how to deal with so much luckiness and that it's best for them to just, well, bomb them for the greater good. It's obviously the most sane thing to do. Well, let's think about this area that was bombed for the greater good. All the buildings and infrastructure like factories and everything that's useful for the economy are destroyed along with everyone's personal belongings and every type of oil there is. Now that they're in such a struggle, their kind neighbors, along with all the rich industrial giants, will fight over who wants to help them rebuild everything that was destroyed. Just in between brackets here, nothing was supposed to be destroyed in the first place. This bombing was no natural disaster. Anyways, we're rebuilding the country, and while we're at it, let's offer them some backup for extra safety against bullies who might, bully them. Of course, none of this was necessary because the destruction wasn't necessary, so the rebuilding wasn't necessary either. But now, we have to give a big thanks for the neighbors because they're guarding your backyard and rebuilding everything they broke, although we all agree that they shouldn't have broken it in the first place. Well, now you rely on their support and can't stand on your own 2 feet, and now the very thing that could have made you rich has destroyed your life and made you poor. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the commodity curse. On to the next thing, and that's a responsibility of those doing well to look after those who aren't doing well. That's mainly an ethical question, so technically there isn't a right or wrong answer because there isn't a certain question being asked, but let's say you see someone drowning in front of you. Is it your responsibility to get that person out of the water? What if someone is drowning but you can't see them? You know they're drowning and you know you can help, but you just don't know what they look like. Are they your responsibility? Does their life matter to you? The nicest question to ask in return is, do you feel like it should matter to others if the tables were turned and you were the one who's drowning? If the answer is yes, then yes, it is your responsibility, and if you answered no, then you didn't think about the question deeply enough. Imagine yourself drowning. That's all I have to say. So, to what extent is it the passerby's fault if they see someone drowning and they have all the power to get them out, but they don't? Did you technically kill them because you had the power to save them, but you didn't? Let's go back to what we were talking about before. How people who have all they need like to take even more of what they don't need, although other people need it desperately. Is it the bully's fault that the kids now don't have shoes? The fact that if we dumb the story down to simple childish terms and the person stealing or destroying was called a bully as a child, what would we call them as adults ruling a country? Another thing to consider is how some countries ruin other countries' reputations and then seem innocent. Some countries dump or recycle their toxic waste on other countries' land. That other countries named, shamed, and blamed for being all third-worldy and harmful to the environment. This is also vague and it isn't even the bigger or smaller picture, but it's a glimpse of global inequality, and it's a glimpse of some man-made problems that shouldn't even exist. An example is China, that used to take care of over half the world's recyclable plastic, about 7.3 million tons of it in 2016, and at a certain point China had enough of taking care of the world's garbage and banned most of the world's foreign rubbish. The important thing to note here is that pollution is strongly linked to poverty. Nearly 92% of pollution-related deaths occur in low and middle-income countries. Who's going to be the one working in the factory? The poor. That means that the rich governments are basically dealing with these matters as if the rest of the nation or world were just servants. The philosopher Peter Singer believes that 1. If we can prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, then we ought to do so. 2. Death by starvation is bad. 3. We can prevent many people from dying of starvation by sacrificing our luxuries, which are not as important. And 4. We have to prevent people from dying of starvation by sacrificing our luxuries. Robert C. Allen notes that before the 1500s everyone was a little poorer or richer, but after the Industrial Revolution there was a sudden gap between the poor and rich. Now there were the wealthy and those in absolute poverty. After that, the wealthy, like Britain, the rest of Europe, and then followed by America, started colonizing resource-rich lands like diamond-rich areas in Africa. The wealthy nations fought over who wants to colonize who. An example is how wealthy nations took the best quality cotton from Egypt for free because it was colonized and they didn't have a say. Then the wealthy would sell those products made with the free cotton for a lot of money. So they were making money with free resources, and the countries that are having its resources taken away for free were then paying for the products that were made with it for money. If Egypt needed anything made with cotton, they'd need to buy it without making any profit beforehand. That way, the colonizers guaranteed they had plenty of resources along with plenty of customers, so the rich get richer and the poor got poorer. I could call that economic colonization. So many years later, we live in a world where cotton isn't at the top of our bucket lists, but the same story gets repeated over and over again. Instead of the events being captured by a feather and ink pen, now they're captured with an iPhone's lens. So, the world was created pretty much equal, but is divided brutally. To what extent, then? To an extent that human beings die, and that is supposed to be a red line.